everyone, and welcome to Across the Bifrost. The immortal Faz is in charge today, which is why you know something new's coming. I'm not just in charge, though. The Deific duo has stolen the reins. Ryan is tied to the goat boat, and here we are in the Deific duo's journey into mystery, Road to 800. That's right, guys. Myself and my co-host, Hercules himself, are going to bring you through every mainline Thor issue. Eric, how's it going, man?
It's going great. I love the long-ass title, Deific Duo, Journey into Mystery, Road to 800. What is this journey that we're on? We've been kind of teasing it for a while. Attentive listeners will notice we've been dropping little hints about this path, this road. Well, a little bit of context here. Let's sort of let the cat out of the bag and talk about this Journey into Mystery, Road to 800. We realized that issue number 800 of Thor Legacy Comics was going to be coming up in about a year and a half or so. And that was a great catalyst. That was a great sort of deadline to impose upon ourselves to say, I wonder if we could read every single Thor comic in between now and when issue 800 comes out. It seems doable. We did a little bit of quick math, and we figured out that this is something we could pull off. Having the deadline in place really felt motivating, and having a buddy along for the ride makes it so that we can get a little competitive, keep each other on track and accountable to finish this challenge before issue 800.
It's really fun. Like, it's something that I've wanted to do forever. You wanted to do forever. We both thought, how are we going to keep the motivation up? And the answer is making it kind of a race. We have a spreadsheet, listeners. It's going to be linked in the description so you can keep up with what we're doing and see if you can catch us and pass us, or just read along with us. And it's great because if I build up a lead, I'll kind of coast for a little bit, and then Eric will catch me and I'll get panicked and I'll read a whole bunch and we'll go back and forth. It's going to be a lot of fun. Now, listeners, it's not just Hercules and I today. We do have a moderator because, as everybody knows, when I'm left alone, things get too unhinged. So he is tied to the goat boat. We have not muffled him yet, though. Ryan Doze, welcome to the show. Good to have you, buddy. Friend of the show, Ryan Doze.
Friend of the show. I love how in these scenarios, as I always end up tied up to something.
Oh, buddy, we're learning a lot about what Eric and I prefer you as. Tied up is the answer. God. So we're here for this.
This for listeners, this is an idea that Eric and Faz pitched to me to do this, and I knew there was no way I was going to be able to keep up. I'm not as quick of a reader as they are, but I fully endorse this very ambitious project that they've got going. And if you're a faster reader of comics than I am, you need to click the link in the episode description and check this out, because they put a lot of really good solid work into this and hours of time so far. We're only talking about the first 100 issues today, and already I'm sure, guys, rough guesstimate, how many hours of comics do you think you've read thus far through the first 100 issues?
Oh my gosh, I think I'm probably at about 15 minutes an issue still. 15
minutes an issue?
Yeah, same.
Christ alive. I want that words per minute count so badly.
Some of them are faster just by virtue of sometimes Stan puts really big blocks of things in and you try to read it all and absorb it all, but it's just not going to happen, and the issue will go faster because of that. But the other ones are slower when you're just obsessed with a Kirby splash page.
Well, and I only want to do this. I only want to do this once. I don't want to just skim through just to say I did it. I might never be going back to some of these issues ever again. So I want to catch all the different things and enjoy it as much as I can.
That's exactly right. And one of the big things about it is we're going to pick up on stuff, and it's going to make a big difference in the Immortal Thor, where Al Ewing is bringing pulls from absolute random issues of Thor that we've never seen before. Listeners, by the time this is over, we will have seen those issues before. We're going to be able to lord that over our special guest and friend of the show, Ryan Doze.
I love that.
That's not a small part of this. The street cred and the ego that we get from reading every single Thor comic in existence is going to be palpable. I think you'll notice.
Yeah. We don't call him Hercules for nothing. He's got that. He's the Lion of Olympus, right? And I'm the immortal Faz is nothing if not a cocky son of a bitch. So those two things together, we're gonna have a lot of fun. Now, the other thing about the name is that It reminds me of my favorite DCEU movie, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn.
What?
So it's long, it's confusing, but it's really not. It all needs to be there. There's no reason to cut this down to Deific Duo. No reason to cut this down to Road to 800. It's all important. Every word matters.
So let me get some of the facts about this challenge.
Yeah,
so
give us the specs.
The goal is every legacy numbered Thor issue, starting with Journey into Mystery 83. So we're not going back to like the Scorpion weird murder mystery stuff, and we're just from Thor on, right? The offshoots that are not legacy numbered are optional, like things like annuals, Unworthy Thor, War of the Realms, right? We might decide to, hey, now's a great time to read that because I'm in that point of the story, but we're just focusing on the Thor, the main legacy Thor title. We started this endeavor on January 3rd. It is a total of 718 issues to get from Journey into Mystery 83 right up through what's going to be Immortal Thor 39, dropping on or around September 30th, 2026. So more than a year from now, we know what we're going to be reading through on like a weekly basis. My gosh, it does sound like quite an undertaking. I put it into terms that you nerds might understand. We're about 18% done with the challenge. If this was Frodo on his 1,800-mile quest in Lord of the Rings, we would be at the point of the story where Frodo is severely wounded and Strider is taking the four hobbits to Rivendell. So I think that pretty much speaks for itself.
Thank you for putting it in terms I understand.
Where we are in the story, right?
That's very helpful for those Marvel only fans out there. And I mean that not as OnlyFans users, people who are fans of only the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Only fans.
Loki has just brought out the Chitauri army, and it's time to fight in New York, is where we are in the Avengers.
Oh, okay. So I'm curious, guys, and people who have been following us, they're diehard ATB fans. They might be wondering, like, hey, you guys are going to be reading like through so many different runs of Thor. Is this like a creator series like we've done in the past with Jason Aaron? We just finished up a month or two or so ago with Walt Simonson. Is this a creator thing, or like how are you guys approaching this, and how will we be approaching the updates here on the pod, like the Deific Duo updates?
Yeah, the main point is that this is not replacing the need for like a Simonson saga or like a Jurgens saga, right? This is not going to be going through issue by issue. It's not even really focused on the plot. We can talk about maybe things that stood out to us or highlights, but it's really more thematic, things that you could only get from that 30,000 foot view, looking at this in 100 issue chunks to kind of piece it up that way. So we'll be doing larger pieces of this at a time, maybe talking about some larger arcs, themes, and really the insights that we get and that you could only get from reading these back to back to back in massive spans of time covered in just a few short weeks.
And listeners, you guys know that I'm our resident vibes guy. So the fact that we're doing a entire challenge based on vibes, I am here for that. I'm writing down notes here or there. I'm actually doing more note taking than I've ever done for any of our things, just so I don't forget, because when you read 100 issues in a month, they're going to disappear if you don't do it, right? It's going to be a bird's eye view. It's going to help us see trends. It's going to remind us of things when we read the newer comics, and we're going to get to see from beginning to end how the Thunder God was built into who he is today.
So I'm curious from a listener point of view. I love that you guys are doing this. And if I could read Silver Age comics in under 20 minutes, like someone might be listening and they're like, "What is this guy got like a 6th grade reading level?" No, I've got a notorious case of ADHD, and I get bored quickly. So Silver Age comics are kind of a slog for me. But if you're out there and you're like, okay, these guys have read 100 issues of Thor's main book, where do we begin this 100 issues and where do we end this 100 issues? Like, what are we bookending our runs with for like you guys said, that eagle eye view? And then maybe I'll follow up with a few more peppery with a few more questions. So
this first set of 100 is essentially the Lee Kirby run. it's like give or take an issue here or there. And I think it ends with like 3 or 4 ones that aren't Jack, but it's the origin, and not every recording listeners will be specifically 100 issues. It might be, but we might decide based on where the creators fit in that we're going to do one that's just about this new creator in this new context, or so on and so forth. But this first one, we're seeing the true beginnings and kind of the tropes and story points that end up becoming what's fundamental to Thor in these first probably 337 issues, until Simonson throws out the baby with the bathwater and brings everything all new. Hercules, does that sound about accurate?
Yeah, I mean, this really is the origin of Thor all the way through, when the sort of original creative team peters out and sort of some positions change. We're seeing the really young, fresh, creative trying things out, trying out powers that don't stick around, changing characters' names occasionally, establishing what is then the status quo that gets emulated again and again and again, and then finally breaking that into really creative, fertile grounds, and then kind of going back to what a status quo is. So it's really, when a character's brand new, the status quo doesn't exist. So we're seeing them discover that sort of in real time.
What I love about this as a massive history nerd, if you look at, the dates of the issues that we're talking about, we're bookending with, we are essentially starting at the summer of 1962, early 60s, to the beginning of the 70s, to the early fall of the 70s. We start off with Thor facing Rockmen from Saturn. And I think what most people will notice when you read those early Journey into Mystery issues before it transitions over to the Thor masthead, Stan and Jack are kind of figuring out what Thor is. Like, sometimes he'll fight criminals, sometimes he'll fight aliens, sometimes he'll fight communists. And then, like, we end this stint of books with like a huge showdown, Galactus and Ego, and the last few issues, I believe, guys, are Thor facing off against Doom.
Yep. Like, either that or it's the first bit of the next set. Yeah.
How appropriate is that now? I mean, literally, we're sitting here a day removed at the time of this recording from the Doomsday casting announcements. So, like, that kind of lined up pretty well for us.
Listeners, we actually read all 100 of these issues last night, so we could talk about those Doom ones. That's all we're doing here. It's only MCU synergy that we're here for. 15
minutes an issue in one night. I'm not gonna lie, Faz, the math is not mathing for me, but
look, I might have got into a hyperbolic time chamber, whatever they call it in Dragon Ball Z, to be able to do it in time. But hyperbaric time chamber,
hyperbolic would be like it was.
I mean, hyperbolic would be a funny in-joke, right? Yeah.
But okay, guys, so you've read the first 100.
No, it's called the hyperbolic time chamber. Sorry,
really?
I need to.
Okay.
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
it's an in-joke. They're touching their nose when they say
it. So in this first 100 issues, what are you noticing about Thor the character? Like, because he is the, like, at 127 it gets switched over to him. Like, this is no longer Journey to Mystery. Like, let's be honest, after 83 it's not Journey to Mystery anymore. It's the Thor book. But what do we notice about Thor specifically, the character?
Yeah, one of the first things I noticed was the interesting, creative, different sort of power sets. I mean, at one point, Thor has Arctic wind breath. At one point, he creates energy blast through friction on Mjolnir. Mm-hmm. So just real outside the box stuff. He time travels multiple times with just Mjolnir spinning alone. And so like that's pretty different than what we see as a more established plot allowing kinds of power sets to occur in the future.
Wouldn't you, real quick, Eric, wouldn't you say that's kind of a testament to Stan and Jack figuring out what his power set will be? Because like we read back retroactively
in hindsight, like,
yeah, here's what Thor's power set is. So when we read like, oh, he has Arctic wind breath, like we're reading that with a 2025 mindset back, and we're like, Thor doesn't have Arctic wind breath. Like, hey, maybe back then they were like, we really want him to just have chilly, like, chilly.
I mean,
breath.
Superman has Arctic wind breath, right? And they're trying to emulate
Right?
what works. Yeah.
Whatever sticks, One of the other things, like Ryan, you talked about sort of the lens of history on this, and I think that's really important to remember that these are all grounded in the context of the time periods in the decades that they're in. Thor is really a character where he's supposed to represent more or less, an aspirational, masculine, heroic figure, right?
Yeah.
Yes, he has some flaws, and that makes some interesting character points where he's learning to be humble and things like that. But more or less, he's supposed to be aspirational. And in the first few issues in the early '60s, it's made a point that he is without fear. He has no fear, and that's what makes him manly and great. And then a decade later, it's much more nuanced and mature. And I'm a hero because I'm acting in spite of my fear. I would be an idiot not to have fear. But what makes me heroic is because I'm afraid and I'm going to do it anyway. And so that's, I think, that mirrors what I believe. I wasn't alive back then, but what I believe is the sort of role of masculinity in society, of how do we view people who we view as heroic and we want to aspire to be like. We're not naive. I mean, this to say I have no fear is completely lacking in emotional intelligence whatsoever. And so we need to be a more emotionally intelligent leaders and heroes, and that's okay to do because it doesn't jeopardize your manhood.
Yeah.
Well, and like you said, you can see the change into the modern concept of being a hero, right? Like, being a hero doesn't mean not being scared. Being a hero means pushing forward in spite of your fears. And in the early '60s, it was, not only is Thor not afraid, he's American. And us Americans are the good guys. And that's the big difference. And then later on, we get a lot less Red Scare and a lot less communism. It still comes up on occasion, but not every other issue. Well, the other thing that's big is they're kind of feeling out how the secret identity works, because they just, popular superheroes have secret identities. Thor needs a human identity, but it's clear from the get-go that he doesn't need one, and it's weird that it's there. And they reckon with it in the letters where people go, I don't understand. Why is it like this? And they go, Odin works in mysterious ways, my friends. It's very difficult to figure out. Maybe we'll figure it out eventually. And they do eventually give it an answer, but I didn't find it satisfactory. I don't know what you think, Eric. In 2025 superhero-ing, it wasn't enough for me to be like, okay, I see why Donald Blake is here.
Well, and it actually doesn't get resolved until years and years later. I feel like the reckoning is in the Donny Cates run, when Donald Blake is like, so I'm just a creation of Odin, and who even am I? Literally
55 years later or more is when they finally reckon with it, because it's just, they go, oh, don't worry about it. It was to teach you a lesson, but also he's completely you and you're completely him.
It's
don't worry about it for now.
Completely flipped. It's not Don Blake the hero that then gets the powers of Thor. It's been Thor all along, and Don Blake is this completely made up person with fake memories. I mean, it's tragic, but that leads to interesting stuff later on. But at the time, it is very simple of just, superheroes have secret identities, so we got to do that too.
And it also, they continually try to find a way to make Donald Blake exist in the story, and it's consistently frustrating, where Thor will have a problem that Thor can solve, and he'll be like, this looks like a job for a scientist, and then he'll bang his cane on the ground. He'll become Donald Blake, and the bad guy will grab the cane. And he'll be like, fuck, now I don't have the cane. I need it back if I'm going to win. And then another 10 panels or a couple pages go by, and we get this battle, and invariably in the last possible second, he gets the cane back and he can become Thor and he wins the day. Or the alternative happens where he's separated from Jonathan and he's got only 60 seconds where I'm going to turn to Donald Blake if I don't get it back. And he either turns into Donald Blake and then gets it back and wins anyway, or with 1 second left gets it back constantly. And it's just so unnecessary.
It is a trope, but those are both very useful mechanics, because it would have just been a Superman story if we didn't have these specific limitations. So although they do get repetitive, and that is part of the status quo that I was talking about, where there's a good stretch of comics where it feels like, oh my gosh, 10 issues in a row or something like that, where it's the I lost my walking stick, or I've been separated from Mjolnir, or Jane's been kidnapped. And those are like the only three things that could go wrong. And they happen over and over and over. But
So
that's the baseline then, I guess.
so I'm curious then. We're deep. We're like at this point, like when at the end of this run, we are almost on the cusp of the Bronze Age. A lot of people would consider the night Gwen Stacy dies in an Amazing Spider-Man to be when the Silver Age ends and the Bronze Age begins. And I know like that's people get loosey-goosey with that. But throughout this Silver Age run of Thor, we're leaning heavily into those tropes. Do you guys have a Silver Age moment of Thor so far where you're just like, this was my favorite issue, this was my favorite moment, like this is where I feel like Thor really shined?
For me, right around 120, it starts to get legitimately good, even with a modern lens, right?
Yeah.
So Thor is reforging Mjolnir in the furnaces of Pittsburgh because a little tiny sliver of it was shaved off. It wasn't smashed. We haven't gotten into the like Mjolnir breaks every issue kind of thing, but a sliver of it was cut off and he's sort of reforging that. And 120 to 123 was a solid multiple storyline arc where they were teasing things, they were dropping a Norrin stone, the absorbing man origin came in. That is where it got into a much more sophisticated storytelling format where it starts to span across issues and not just have each issue be the same story over again, essentially. So that for me was a noticeable turning point where I said, now it's starting to feel like it's a series where we have to read the next issue to find out, as opposed to just a bunch of one-offs.
Yeah,
I agree. And more than that, it was once they started doing these 2, 3, 4, 5 issue runs, the villain quality went kind of insane because it wasn't just a one-off issue. Thor's losing. He turns it around. He wins in 2 panels. It was like, oh, you want to take on a troll? All right, let's do that for 3 issues. You're going to figure out some Galactus stuff? Here's 6 issues to go through that entire lore, right? You want to fight the Destroyer? All right, that's 3 issues. It's just the amount that you could tease out in that time frame. Not every run and not every story was a winner. But the quality, like Eric said, all of them are eminently readable, and they're just very enjoyable. And we get some crazy stuff, like Ulick is there for the first time. Mangog is there for the first time. Destroyer is there for the first time. Obviously, this goes without saying, but Loki is there for the first time, and he completely changes from the first couple books being a silly man who can't do magic when he's wet into a true villain for the Odinson as we go, right? The amount of magic that Jack and Stan caught. Hercules has a huge run with him in this. I'm looking at the covers right now to remind myself. It's just the Galactus stuff. We get so much about his backstory. Not enough. One of the tropes in this run, which really angered me, was every time shit got good, Odin would step in and be like, that's good enough. Thank you. You've held them off long enough. A story for another time then, and go on the way. And it drove me bananas because knowing what I know in 2025 of how the story goes, I thought that we were going to get the answer and we don't. They leave it for some time. But like there's a Surtur saga in here. We have just some truly amazing stories in the first 100.
A primordial version of the Surtur saga we would get later on. And we
can't even, this is not even talking about Tales of Asgard, which is probably the best part of this.
So let's talk about that too. Kind of I'm going to couple it up with a question that I really want to know from you guys is, in that Tales of Asgard, like what do you enjoy about Tales of Asgard? But also, who is a character that's not Thor that really stood out to you in this run, whether negatively or positively, is someone that you really feel like, oh my gosh, this character, like this book would not be the same without this character?
Interesting. For me, I would have to say, well, it's difficult. The world of Asgard, I think the Warriors 3, getting to see them much more often and see them in action was really nice, because in Tales of Asgard they were much more prominent, and in some of these arcs they're incredibly important, and not just color commentary or side stories and things like that. And we don't see a whole lot of that as much in the modern comics, where the Warriors 3 really are playing really important roles and having consequential actions in the plot. And then I think some of these other just very small characters, the Norn Queen, the reporter Harris Hobbs, like some of these really sort of just small, very small parts that they get a lot more play. For me, with all of the Norn Queen and Balder, a ton more context there. Seeing that really sort of tortured love story of we're enemies, but I'm mad about you, but we're really not a healthy couple. But like, that comes up over and over again, and it's enjoyable to see that again, that level of complexity and creativity in this sort of time period. It makes it really interesting because I wouldn't have thought they would have that complex of a relationship, I guess, in this sort of time period.
Well, especially comparing, since you went very positive, I'll skew slightly negative. The Jane-Thor relationship drove me insane. There was no reason for them to be together other than they love each other. And it's like, why? Well, she's a hot nurse and he's a hot doctor. And it's just like willing to give up the godhood. I really loved the way they wrapped up the story with Jane without getting too into it for listeners that are going to read these on their own. The ending for her is excellent. Where Thor gets what he thinks he wants, it doesn't make sense. Ryan, I don't know if you've read this to know what the story is, but
I have.
Yeah, like the way that it ends with kind of him getting everything he wanted with her and it not working out, and Odin knowing it's not going to work out, leading to his best love interest of all time immediately after. The good lady Sif. I think in the same issue, Odin goes, "Look over there. Look at how pretty she is." Yeah, and then they kind of go
her
from
the
there.
rebounder.
I wouldn't say that. She's been the love for at least 40 issues that I've been.
And she will so far, for right? many years after.
Yeah. I think the love interests for the most part were not written very well, which is why Carnilla and Balder was really impressive. And I've read before reading this that Balder sucked until Walt got his hands on him. And I don't think that's true. Walt definitely reinvigorated the character.
Yeah.
But he is really interesting and Carnilla is really fun. And it's very... They've done a really good job on so many side characters that, like Eric said, aren't side characters. They're just co-leads in most of these issues. I like the Vizier, like Odin's helper, who's helping him through the stuff. And he's usually on Odin's side, and sometimes he's like, I don't know about that. I think they've, like the introduction of Ego, it felt like the comics used to have so much more in them, which is crazy.
The level of creativity is off the charts. When they start taking acid, or I don't even know what they're doing, when they start creating entire races of aliens, they created the Rigellans, Tana Nile, and
Tana Nile,
and you get these weird Monty Python collage pages of like photos of stuff that they...
Jack was on that good shit.
Oh, it's weird stuff. But like to just invent Ego out of whole cloth, like who comes up with that? And that's so wild compared to just...
Look at Mangog. It doesn't make... Like, how could you have thought of that? Like...
To go from fighting communists and fighting like street level crime to creating Mangog and Ego in almost like sort of back-to-back arcs. It's just wild creativity.
And they do this thing too where it's not like now where the hero wins but you can feel that the villain's going to come back next time. There is hard finality. Mangog is gone forever. The billions of souls have been rebrought to life by Odin. Everything's good. And then 30 issues later, they're like, fuck it, Mangog's back. No one even knows why. Who cares? Let's do this. We're doing it. And it's just like they consistently write themselves into problems and then write themselves out of problems. And it's really fun to see because you can see that there's a kind of a long-term goal, but it's not like now, where they've written all the main tent poles for every point of the story before they even start the 100-issue run. It's like, we like these things. We're going to think of ways to bring them back later if we like them and if they're well received. But if they're not, we're never going to see that guy again. And that's okay. And we'll still make it work.
So here's my observation of like 60s comics and like a lot of 70s comics too. Is because we're not at a point in comics history where we're writing for trades. We are writing for the quarter or the 20 cents or the 35 cents you're going to spend at the newsstand. I think it forces these creators to pump out stories that are landing immediately. Like they're trying to hit home runs every time up to bat. They're trying to really connect with readers. There is none of this like, okay, here's how like a 5-issue, 6-issue story arc should be set out. And I think that's where you get big swings. You get big swings like Mangog. You get big swings like Ego. You bring in Galactus, and really, Galactus had only had a few appearances in Fantastic Four up until this point, but Galactus is like the body of his story really gets played out in a Thor book, which is kind of nuts and fun. One other thing, guys, and then I'll kind of ask you like what your final thoughts are of like these first 100 issues, if you can even sum up your final thoughts. With Thor being this hero that he can face bigger threats than just communist soldiers and street level thugs, that feels mega beneath him. Though he'll still fight that battle, but it's still like power level wise super below him. This is one of the first characters in the Marvel canon to face those next level threats. Those next level, like, oh, this is a planet killer threat. You know, it's not like Cap and Spider-Man and Daredevil where they're, you know, busting up crime, and Iron Man and Hulk are facing off against these super strong villains. Thor is like, I am fighting planets at this point. So Thor is really on that next level. That's just my one observation in this first 100 issues is Thor goes from being like, oh, you're like another Marvel superhero, to being, I am the one guy that can fight this battle. And I think that's a really cool distinction that Thor has this early on in the Marvel canon. But I want to ask you guys like final thoughts about the first 100 issues, the first initial journey of the Deific duo throughout this road to 800. We're at our first pit stop, and I just need to we need to refuel, we need to hit the bathroom, we need to, you know, do all that kind of stuff. But before we launch into the next part, what are some of your like overall thoughts so far?
I mean, one thing for me is just, you can argue whether these are the best issues of Thor. You can argue whether it's the best art. It is clearly the most important in every way. These issues, listeners, are why the character is the way he is. These characters, this writing, these things that Jack draws, this stuff that Stan thinks about, it creates this character that 60 years later, audiences are still captivated by. That 60 years later, the biggest movie company in the world can start a stream announcing characters with Thor, and people will go crazy for it. The drawing, the costume, everybody's costumes, not just Thor, everybody in the whole area, the
Odin's headdresses,
the long arcs, the team up villains, everything that they're doing is why Thor is the way he is now. And it's incredible to kind of see the origin, see them finding their way, seeing, like Eric said, when they put it all together, and then going on just a crazy run of mayhem for the first 100 issues.
Yeah, I think that has been fascinating and invigorating to see. I think that as we've been reading these, I expected to get bored or to like lose steam at some point. We've been doing this for months now, and I'm still go like every week trying to read about 10 issues or something like that. So, I mean, our pace is still there, and it's still really enjoyable, I'm finding. For me, it's appreciating the seeds of history. The early issues do legitimately feel like sacred text, where you're like, that's a weird sort of way to put that, but like that's the seed that's going to turn into this entire arc later on, and then this movie later on. So it's like you can see the kernels there. But I think just to appreciate that at the time, they had no idea what would come in the future. They're just making these things individually. And so the difference between villains like the Enchanters, plural, where in the letters page they get rave reviews and everyone's like, we love the Enchanters, and who's ever even heard of them now? It's not, they haven't been, but at the time they're side by side with Hela, and so they're just as likely to get picked up and talked about, but they just didn't, right? So there's still a lot of interesting things, just you don't know at the time what's going to take off and what's not. Just some wild things when you're thinking about origin stories. The Wrecker, at the time, incredibly powerful. spoiler alert, he kills Thor. Like Hela is about to claim Thor's the Wrecker, right? So wild stuff. That you think you kind of know the origin stories, but then you go back and you actually read it verbatim off the page, and you're like, sometimes you're like, huh, oh, that was it, and sometimes you're like, rock on, that was so epic. So
Eric, just a quick piggyback off of that, I will say, people that have maybe never read the first appearance of Loki and are like, "Oh my gosh, Loki's such a cool character," I'm like, you should read his first appearance because he is a effing dork in the first issue,
and he loses by getting wet. I was not kidding when I said that.
Getting wet, like
he can't do magic when he's damp. It's very disappointing.
He's in a Grimm's fairy tale.
No, Eric's right. Like we were told that it was going to get boring, and that the second that Kirby leaves, we're going to kind of hate it. And I'm like, what are we, like 30 issues past Kirby now, maybe 40? Yeah. And like, I'm not slowing down. I'm liking everything that they're putting down. Like, I don't always love the characterization in an individual issue or anything, but it's a hella good time, guys. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. I bid everybody the chance to join us. Eric, anything else before I hop across the Rainbow Bridge and we talk to them next time?
Yeah, check out our spreadsheet that calculates the percentage that you've read by checking off boxes. You can open up the Google Sheet and just go save as and make your own copy. And then you can do this read along quest with the same sort of template that we've created.
Yeah, we'd love to have you doing that, guys. And tell us if you are. Keep us updated on how it's going. We would love to have some participation with you guys. Everybody, for my brother from another pantheon, for my Deific duo teammate, for my guy Hercules, for our special guest and friend of the show, Ryan Doze. That's all we got today. We're going to hop across that rainbow bridge, no matter where you are, whether you're creating a character from scratch, ripping off Norse mythology and hoping that it's going to stick, whether you are inventing new villains and seeing what's going to happen, whether you're reading hundreds of issues of comics because Doctor Doom was referenced the day before and you've only got 24 hours. All we can tell you to do, wherever you are, is stay worthy.
Possess the power of thought.
Bum 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 bum.
Ba-dum-bum. Bum, 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 bum.